will have to leave. I realize it is getting late. We're not going to do that. Yes, ma'am. Yes. Okay. Trust. The idea of a trust is just, it's really an arrangement where somebody is holding and managing money for somebody else. That's the whole idea. A trust is set up usually in writing where the requirements are spelled out. Why have we set up this trust? And what are the purposes of it? What are we trying to achieve for the beneficiary, the person who's to get the money? Trusts have been used for hundreds of years as a way of managing money for the benefit of someone who can't handle it themselves. And that remains to be one of the major purposes of a trust. You have a beneficiary, your child, the person who's going to inherit from you, is not able to manage money themselves, and a trust is a good way for you to leave it for them, but with someone else. It could be another family member or a professional who's responsible for managing it and spending it for them. Another reason to have a trust is that the child may even be able to manage money, but because of some impairment, physical impairment or mental impairment or combination, is not able to work and support themselves. They have a disability. A disability may include money management, it may not. But the idea is that if money is left directly to the individual, it may make them ineligible for benefits. No work, no benefits, no money, no support. The person has no capacity to maintain themselves. So a trust can very often be used in this context for parents to leave whatever they have. It might be the proceeds of life insurance or the house or anything else in trust for the disabled child, so that the money can be used for him, but not disqualify him from benefits. That's the basic idea. I have a paper in the office. There are about 12 different kinds of special needs trusts that deal with slightly different variations on this. But that's the basic idea. Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to mention that also older parents, if they need to go into Medicare, it's got either 5 years, so there's a trust. It protects both of the
Right, let me repeat what you said so they can hear it. The trust can also be used by elders, by parents, directly. It's not at all an uncommon situation where we have a parent who has grown older, the child has grown older with the parent and they've stayed together. We may end up dealing with the situation where we're dealing both with an aging parent and a child who is now becoming maybe independent for the first time at 35 or 40. And in those situations, we often use trust both for the parent and for the child. If a parent is facing many nursing home placement, and this is really the specific example the person was giving, there is a special kind of trust, one of those 12, to which the parent can transfer assets for the benefit of the child without the parent becoming disqualified for Medicaid. Usually, if a parent just gives away assets, there's a 5-year waiting period now for nursing home coverage for Medicaid. But there are exceptions, and one of the exceptions is where a transfer is made to a particular kind of a special needs trust for the benefit of their disabled child. We very, very often use these kinds of trusts in situations where we have an aging parent dealing with a younger disabled child. Even though we may not have a need for nursing home placement now, just in case, so that the situation is in place and we know what we're going to do if we're faced with that. That's a horrific tragedy. If we have a situation where a parent has managed to acquire some assets to leave for the child, but then the parent, him or herself, faces nursing home placement and the risk of losing everything, both for themselves and loss of support for the child in the future. Other questions or on the financial side? Yes, ma'am.
How about if the child is not severely disabled? The training management for the trained child or disabled.
Good.
Because some kids are not severely disabled and managing money.
I think the question has to do with, the question has to do with a child who is not so severely disabled. A child who may be willing to work and able to work to some extent. I think the trust is still useful because that child, even if working, is in a very vulnerable situation. You know, that child is likely going to be the last hired, the first fired in economic bad times. Their earnings will likely be very low. So that they remain eligible for whatever extra help they can get is still important for them, even though they have some earnings.
Yeah, the training.
To manage the money itself? Okay, the question I think also has to do with managing money. What if a child has some ability to manage money? I think here, the trustee really has much discretion to make decisions based on the circumstances. And I mean, trust that I operate as a trustee, we often have a situation where we make a decision that so much money is going to go to the child every month. It's going to manage that amount of money, and it's important that he have that experience. We know that for people to learn, they have to have risks. They have to have responsibilities. They can't learn without that.
Yeah, because my 11-year-old, she's dying. Sometimes I find her with money in his pocket.
Yeah.
When he calls me, I'm going to go shopping. So you already know that you have to take money. Sometimes I take $10 in my pocket, and it's $5 or he says no.
It's hard.
I think I would just, I tell him like say, I have a saving bank for him.
Yeah.
To trade some money for that. If I go out, take $1, $2, buy something, like buy, I have to take some money. So I'm planning that from now, every goes and take money with it.
The idea is that it's important that people have experience with money, they have training with it. I think what we're really talking about are the sums that you're hoping to be able to set aside to provide really what he needs. You know, the idea would be that with whatever income he has, maybe, or with some of his SSI, he can buy the personal things and have experience in dealing with that. But the hope is that if there's anything to leave for him, to really serve a more important purpose, with somebody else making more important decisions. That's the idea. So you want to let him do the day-to-day, somebody else do the more important. That's the idea, to find the right balance for that.
No, actually, question over here.
Yes, ma'am.
My son, he has autism, but he's on the high spectrum. Now, I work with people with special needs, and I've seen this on 3 separate occasions where trusts were set up for like individuals with special needs in our program, and their parents passed away, and the monies were then turned over to someone else that stole, all their assets. Is there something that could be set in place, like a safeguard? Say if I wanted to do something for my children in the future, say if I put like a family member in place and something happens to that family member, how do I safeguard my children's assets?
All right. The question is sort of how, if you look at a trust going off into the future, what we're talking about generally is trying to set something up that will work in the future when we're not able to do it ourselves. The question is, how do we set things up to try to still have controls over it when we're not there to watch what's going on? I think that the use of family members as trustees can be very helpful. There are other roles that family members can play. Family members can be written into a trust as we call them trust monitors or trust advisors. These are people who are entitled to receive reports every month from the trustee as to what's going on. People who are in a position to be able to complain or complain even legally if they need to, if they think the trustee is acting inappropriately. If a lawyer is a trustee or a brokerage house is a trustee, then there are insurance protection built into it. It's malpractice insurance or bond insurance. Really, the bar has a special program to replenish funds that if somebody has taken them. But there is that risk. I think what you want to avoid is a situation where there's one person dealing with the money and nobody watching. You know, so I think to have 2 trustees is good. You know, then they have to make decisions together. Have family members involved in some place, some way. Family members can have the right to choose. You can put in a trust that the family members have the right to change the trustee if they're just not happy with the way they're communicating with them, or they're not spending enough. So you try to build in safeguards, and you do the best you can, you know, and you hope for the best a little bit. But it's still better, let me just say one thing, it's still better, the alternative is just to leave the money to some other family member with the hope and the promise that they'll use it appropriately for the citizen. And that really gets risky. It's a potential problem because that person can't really safeguard the money. If that person gets divorced or dies or becomes disabled, then the money is just lost.
Yeah, that's what happened to this individual, someone else.
At least with a trust, if you have some institution, a law firm or a brokerage house or a bank that's responsible for it, they have a lot of risk in not being careful with the money.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other? Yes, ma'am.
Within Boston, is there any assistance, like, for housing, and my son is autistic, and I can only, do work for a specific amount of time, and I was wondering, is there any housing assistance to help, to supplement, afford housing?
Is this a question about housing assistance?
Yeah,
Or,
because, like, I can only work part-time because my son is autistic, and I can only do work while he's at school, and I'm not, I really have no one to take care of
okay,
him.
now this assistance relating to you're
Yeah.
getting housing or somebody
Yeah.
getting actually housing,
Yeah,
like
because-
rental?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, the big agency in the Boston area is the Metropolitan Boston Housing Partnership. It's the big agency that deals with Section 8 and a number of other state and federal housing programs.
Do they have any benefits for people with children with special needs?
Well,
Or is it just for anyone?
it's really for anyone. Well, they have some special programs for disabled people. Actually, the person who just left, the person who left a few minutes ago, is with the Boston Center for Independent Living. It's another agency. This is an agency that deals with people with special needs and provides assistance to them with respect to housing. It's not, they don't provide housing
Well,
itself.
as it for
Well, it's for parents and disabled and a child with disabilities.
I was just wondering if there was a specific program I could talk to you about.
I've worked with the Boston Center for Independent Living for many years. I would write down that name, or I can give a link for you later. It's the Boston Center for Independent Living. They have terrific resources on information and referral on any housing-related issues for people with disabilities.
So there's any number I can reach you if I don't want to ask any questions?
Yeah, well, there's the paper, my name and numbers on the paper. Take the paper. Yeah, I'm happy to take calls later. Yes, ma'am.
In regards to wills, you have to write specific things in the will regarding the care. My son is high on autism, but when our will was drawn up a couple years ago, he was diagnosed with the drugs my husband was employed, and it just says who's get, who's getting. You have to put in specific things in place, like, obviously, he's too high functioning to be institutionalized, I would never want that. You have to write that in the will, so the person who's taking care of you, that you don't want that, like what are your wishes, or things do not do something like that.
Well, the will is a good place for some general guidance and major decisions. It doesn't really work very well for fine tuning. What we often do is to have, in addition to the will, we have what we might call a letter of intent. This is more of a parent's perspective on sort of what you see in your child, what you see as his strengths, his wishes, the things that really turn him on and that really turn him off, things that could be useful to whoever might take care of him, if God forbid, if something happened to you and your husband and then somebody else was trusted with his care. So I think that would be an important thing. The other is that the question of whether he may or may not need guardianship at age 18, how old is he now? 4. I was going to say, it had to be very small. Yeah, so it's a little early to tell.
Yeah.
Right now, definitely needs guardianship.
Yeah.
So I think often what we do is make sure that the will has a provision in it that says that if my child does need a guardian at age 18, then it is my wish that, then name somebody. That's important. The guardianship provisions usually just deal with children. So you want to make sure that, and you need to think about this. What am I going to do if something happens to maybe my mother or maybe somebody within my immediate family? But the judge is going to want to see what your decision is. The judge may have to do something different at this time because the person you name may not be available. But that should be the starting point. And the other thing has to do with the way you leave money to the child.
Yeah,
A
so I
simple
know it's
will.
like written that, whoever I left, so the first person would be my sister, that's my son, God forbid something happens.
Right.
And then our money is put in trust for him, he can't touch it till he's, I think the lawyer was like 22 is a good age.
22 is a good age, but, this is the but, here again, it's the same issue. We don't know what 22 is going to be. So we'll often, in a situation where we don't know, we don't want to force there to be a trust. There's no point in setting him a trust for his lifetime when he's not going to need it. But to give the executor or the trustee the power to make a decision at that time about whether a trust is necessary is something we often put in. What it would say is that at the time of distribution, at age 22, when he would otherwise get the money, somebody is identified in the will as having the authority to say, wait a minute, let's look at the situation. Should we keep this in trust or not beyond 22? Let's give it to him if it's fine, not if it's not. So that's the sort of provision. I think you want to have both of those kinds of provisions in your will. Yes, ma'am.
My question is, if your kid is high functioning, my son is high functioning, he's 12. I really see him having a job and being productive. He's really intelligent. He's able to do a lot of things. If I was to leave him money, is there a way that I can leave him money and he just, so it's sort of like a paycheck where he just, and I don't have to leave anybody to oversee it? It just sort of would be like a trust, but like a check every month until whenever it runs out.
The question was whether without a trust, whether you could set up something where there's just an automatic amount of money coming to the individual.
Right, sort of like Social Security.
Right.
Like it's just,
Like a pension or an annuity.
Yes, there are ways to take a lump sum of money and actually create a stream of income for someone's lifetime. And you can set it up a couple of different ways, and the income could stop when that person dies. You could set it up a way that if there's money left over, some lump sum could go to some beneficiary. So yes, you can do that. So that takes the risk away of having a lump sum that could potentially be spent all at once and just create a lifetime paycheck. Yes, you can.
The only concern I would have with that in this context is that if his life becomes more complicated, if he has I won't even say he, if a child had, a problem, developed other problems, and wasn't able to work, support himself, if he had this sort of stream of income coming in automatically, that couldn't be stopped, it could really mess up the benefit. That would be the concern about it. The trust could be written so that the person does have a right to some amount of income. But that's the flip side, is that if you create this automatic stream of income, then there's a potential problem if later he can't work. That's the problem.
I have another question.